You open this door with the key of reason. Beyond it is another dimension, a dimension of truth, a dimension of freedom, a dimension of joy. You're moving into the land of both the ideal and the real, of the possible and the actual. You've just crossed over into the capitalist corner.
Where reason meets reality, welcome to the capitalist corner.
Yes, folks, where reason meets reality, welcome to the capitalist corner. We hope we are your island of reason in a sea of irrationality, and to help you folks weave your way through all the craziness that's out there in the world. We have a very special guest today, Robert Mulligan. I just became acquainted with you, Robert, by reading your great article in the Daily Economy. But Robert, you're a prominent American economist, educator, and researcher specializing in Austrian economics, my favorite kind of economics, business cycle theory and monetary policy. There's tons of things we can say about you, but I want to talk about this article first. First, we have to do a bunch of disclaimers, and then I want to talk to you about this great article.
Can I just tell you something, too? We got to have him back on to talk about Austrian business cycle theory. I just want to introduce him with the topic today, but we got a whole thing. If he's willing to come back,
please do it before the next recession.
Yes, before.
We can give you credit for predicting it.
We feel like it can happen anytime. Yeah, I want to hear I do want to hear before the end of the show when you think that is going to happen, because
he's an Austrian. He can't predict when. Come on.
I know, but we'll talk about that in a minute. I just want everybody to know I am the host of Capitalist Corner, also the chairman of the American Capitalist Party, along with my co-host Michael Liebowitz, who is the vice chair of the American Capitalist Party. He has his own shows out there called the Rational Egoist. He also does Self-Made Soul with me on the weekends, the intersection of philosophy and psychology. And he's got, Practical Ethics? Is that what the other show is called that you do on a daily basis? Don't
for the love of everything.
Don't hurt me because I'm doing it wrong.
Everyday Ethics. I do Everyday Ethics every weekday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time.
Every day, folks, you get a dose of everyday ethics from Michael Liebowitz, and I guarantee you're going to be better off for the experience. I have to say that the show itself, I have to do this for legal reasons, Michael, because of the party.
I thought you were going to say you had to do it for Liebowitz.
Is not affiliated with the American Capitalist Party. If you want to know what our policies are, please go to AmericanCapitalistParty.org and donate. Become a part of the change, folks. If you're tired of the tribalism out there, if you're tired of the bull crap, there is a third way, folks, and the third way is truth, reason, individualism, individual rights, and capitalism, which is what we stand for, which we stand for principally. Now, Robert, you wrote this great article for Daily Economy.
Hold on a second.
Yes.
We didn't promote my latest episode with Jim Valiant.
Okay,
I got a great episode of The Rational Egoist out there right now with Jim Valiant, where we absolutely take a sledgehammer to the whole idea of anarcho-objectivism. Please check it out. And Mark, as a reminder, please go to my X page and share my X post to yours.
Yes, I always forget to do that. I will.
Okay, now you can get to poor Robert, who's probably already sick of us.
Robert, thank you so much for coming. I love this article.
How could I be sick of you guys?
Well, I can imagine it.
I hope you have as much fun with us as we have with each other, and hopefully with you. The title of the article was "Income Inequality Rightly Understood." Now, this has become a huge issue over the last, I'd say, at least 7 or 8 years. I don't even remember 10 or 15 years ago, hearing the issue of income inequality becoming such a politically charged thing as it has become today. But explain a little bit to us what this all means, and should we be concerned about this thing called income inequality?
Well, my position is no, you primarily should not be concerned about income inequality per se. There are all kinds of reasons why different people will earn different incomes. In a perfectly functioning, perfectly free capitalist society, some people will earn more simply because they're more successful at providing value for others. So it's like voluntary exchange, as long as people are not absolutely identical in talents, wealth endowment, and everything else. If people aren't identical like worker ants, you're going to have some distribution of income. That's perfectly natural, and it's really not something that should worry philosophers. Now, what's happened over time is we've developed these theories of A, social justice, and B, like Rawlsian distributive justice, that give rise to cries for greater redistribution of income and greater equality of income. But my perspective is you have to look at what's the source of the inequality. Is it because of different people's levels of productivity in serving the ends and building the welfare and happiness of their neighbors, or is it from some sort of coercive government favor that's conferred on specific people? And we have plenty of that in the United States today, and basically you have a lot more of it in more corrupt societies. So it's like, if that's the source of the income inequality, it's something that really does need to be rooted out. But it's like income inequality per se, no, it's not a problem. And for virtually everybody that does see it as a problem, well, they don't care what the source is. It's objectively evil, and it's objectively evidence of Marxian exploitation of the worker, and we need to have the government step in and correct it.
Robert, I read an article the other day by someone I think is your colleague, Don Boudreau. And
yes, I know Don.
So, and he talked about the idea that's put out there by many people that when there's vast disparities of wealth in societies, it leads to societal collapse. But what Don said, and I'm curious to get your take on this, is when they're saying that, they're talking about like feudal countries. They're not talking about market-based societies where everybody was going up in wealth, but there was inequality. They're talking about where you have absolute poverty contrasted with absolute abundance. I'm just curious if you've looked at it in that light, or if you've ever thought of it in that light, or anything along those lines.
Well, I think, it's like the model of a very unequal society would be, Europe under the feudal system, where you have lords and kings who own everything. The serfs are bound to the land, and they earn, meager subsistence incomes, and the wealth and, which is really pathetic by today's standards, but it's like the comparatively extravagant wealth of the robber barons is built on the productivity of the serfs, and I mean, that's not a good society. It's not a democratic society. It's like, we have to recognize, it's like, well, there were some things going right in that society that enabled us to develop democracy in the UK, but it's like, it's certainly not the ideal that we would want to go back to the good old days. This kind of society was very, very stable for many, many years, but it was also technologically very, very stagnant. I mean, it's like population didn't increase dramatically until the Industrial Revolution, which enabled, through technological means, the development of this new thriving middle class. And it's like, this is what people are up in arms against about income inequality today. It's the rise of this industrial bourgeoisie and their successors in higher technology. And it's like, Elon Musk and Bill Gates, they just make too much. It's obscene, and we need to redistribute some of their income to benefit people who are more likely to vote for me. And I think that's the basic worldview. Now, I think, from Boudreau's perspective, again, he's not really distinguishing between whether this income inequality, high incomes, are being earned through voluntary exchange and through making other people's lives better. I will rant and rave no end about the shortcomings of Microsoft products, but the fact is, it's like the technology of making computers available to everybody, and particularly cell phones, is something that's been a tremendous net benefit throughout our society. And it's made people a lot more productive, even as it's created new problems where people spend, endless hours doom scrolling and stuff like that. It's like there are all these trade-offs when you introduce anything new. People won't adopt it unless it actually provides them some sort of net benefit. And it's like, you have to distinguish between this positive kind of inequality and negative inequality that results from government favors and government corruption. I will say, if you have very, very high levels of inequality in a society, you run the risk of the people at the lower tier feeling that they're not, equal and full participants. Nevertheless, in our society, the poorest people have the same vote as the richest people. So I mean, you have that level of and degree of automatic built-in enfranchisement. What I also see as and this is not my view, but a critique of society that tends to promote a need or an argument for further redistribution is that the very, very rich can manipulate elections and they can manipulate public opinion through advertising, and they have this unlimited budget for this. And basically, because the Supreme Court has tied that to free speech, I think we still have the further barrier is like, well, it's up to us whether we're going to be swayed by this advertising and this argument. We still have free will. We still have our own perceptions. And I tend to tune out those kinds of arguments that are either paid for by capital or, promoted by some sort of, what I view as, this very false Marxian class consciousness.
The stuff that Bernie Sanders says, for example, like Elon Musk is about to become the first trillionaire. No trillionaire should exist in the world. He has more wealth than, and he'll name a list of people combined and claim as if just that simple fact makes him an evil person that needs to be exploited.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, it removes agency from these people because it doesn't matter what they do or what choices they make. And in fact, if the wealth has resulted from any choices they make, it implies a critique of those choices, even though, Elon is, I think, a really bad example because he's profited immensely from government subsidies. Yeah. It's like he was never my example of an unfettered capitalist success.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, it's like, I think if the government gives you the money, then maybe the government should take it away to equalize things. Really, wouldn't it be more efficient for the government not to have done that in the first place?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Bernie Sanders, I mean, what I think is obscene is that Bernie Sanders accumulated the wealth in public service that he has and that he owns, I don't know how many houses.
Three.
Only three. Well, that's kind of modest, but it's like, why is if he's going to rail against the obscenity of our consumer society where we have 30 different brands of deodorant from which to choose from, I mean, my reaction to that is that we need at least one more, given that argument.
I love that. I've often asked Bernie Sanders because I noticed he took millionaires off of his target list once he became a millionaire.
Well, too many of them are donors,
Yeah, and then it became billionaires who shouldn't exist, and now we have a potential trillionaire that shouldn't exist. But I have asked him if he would give up at least 2 of his homes, since he doesn't need all 3 homes to subsist, and a good portion of his millions to the benighted workers of the world out there that he says are hurting. I've never gotten a response from him though, so I'm assuming that he's not going to do any of that. In fact, I've heard him say outright when confronted with this, Bob, that he's earned it. He's earned his millions.
He's earned his millions because he's been in the legislature, dictating to the rest of us, what we should be doing,
That's right.
Live.
So,
and what would we do without, this conscience of the?
Oh, we'd be screwed.
Oh, thank God.
So that. People, Ayn Rand pointed it out. Ludwig von Mises pointed it out. Hayek pointed it out. It's the influence of the intellectuals on society. Now, in our day, the modern patron saint of railing against inequality would be Thomas Piketty. What can you tell us about him, and why is he wrong?
Well, he developed this thesis that, income inequality is bad, it's pernicious, it's holding France and other developed countries back. So then he constructed data series that supported his thesis, and to some extent, this is something he had to do because you just did not have reliable data series of government data going back to the 1800s. I mean, he's basically starting about 1800 with the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, and he's bringing it up to the present. And primarily what he's finding with these data series, and it's built on tax revenues, that you have most detailed and extensive data going back the longest period. It's like in the United States, we have GDP data. If you go to Fred, I think the series starts, GDP probably starts later, maybe 1948, but you can get the index of industrial production back to 1919. And you can get historical series that have been constructed, with maybe questionable methods going back to 1776 or even earlier, if you want to do research on that. But his basic thesis is that he constructed data to validate his thesis, and he finds that income inequality was very, very low during periods of high growth, and it's much, much higher, and that suppresses economic growth. And what he's not factoring into this, which is available in the tax receipt data, he's not looking at the government's redistributive schemes of a progressive income tax, which, it's like we have this in the United States since about World War I, but, it's like these redistributive, spending schemes were already much, much greater in Europe. So there should have been a stronger redistributive impact, which he's largely overlooking. He's basically censoring it out of his data and then saying, this redistribution that's taking productive capital out of the hands of the people who might use it to reinvest in their businesses and build new factories. The fact that this is being, provided as a social safety net, what's happening is that this is acting as a brake on growth. And it's like, it's certainly beneficial for poor people to have their incomes supported, but, that's at a cost of the business expansion that would create greater employment and result in fewer poor people. So I mean, he's collecting the data and kind of constricting it in such a way that it gives him the answer that he wants.
Yeah, he does. He doesn't want to disprove his own premise, by the way. And that was a popular book. A lot of people got some. I don't know that most actually read it.
People were insisting that he should get and of course, anyone who says you should get a Nobel Prize, it's 99% political and maybe 1% academic merit. So it's like the calls for him to get a Nobel Prize for that book had to do with their political approval of the message and the false impression that lay people get that this book provides tremendous evidence in support of his thesis. It actually provides very, very poor evidence in support of his thesis because it's so poorly executed.
You mentioned the
very effectively refuted by academics like Phil Magnus.
Phil Magnus, whom I think I've talked to about this, but I'm not really sure. I've talked to him about a lot of topics. But one of the things that Piketty does is, when factoring in wealth inequality in order to justify more redistribution, he doesn't factor in income after the redistribution that's already taken place. So he doesn't factor in welfare benefits, SNAP benefits, healthcare benefits, or just cash transfers. He goes pre-transfer and then says, this is how unequal we are. We need more transfers. Is that accurate, the way that I'm putting it?
Yes, it is, and it's basically I mean, I think if you look, if you're in favor of any kind of social safety net, obviously there has to be an optimal level of that, but you know, for Piketty and many other people, no, there is no optimal level. It's like it has to be infinite. It's like there's no end to what can be provided in terms of additional government programs. There's no amount that would necessarily be enough, or that would ever, in principle, be enough. It's just an argument to make the government bigger, to export. And their argument is, well, we're not going to take it from poor and middle class people. We're only going to take it from billionaires and trillionaires. But the fact is, you have to go after the middle class because that's where the money is.
Didn't they justify the passage of the income tax by saying that it would only hit the richest 1 to 3% of the population?
Yes. That was the original income tax bill, and I mean, we know how that worked out. It's like
it would never go
that's the
beyond
camel
that.
that got his nose under the tent, and he stayed there.
And we have a question for you from the great James Valiant, Bob. What are the benefits of wealth income inequality, if any?
Well, income inequality that results from some people being more productive than others. You need to reward like a stronger manual worker for the fact that he can lift and carry twice as much, whatever it is that's being carried. If you've got a big, strong guy who's, a stevedore loading ships for foreign ports, you got to pay him more than you would pay me. It's just like that's a question of basic justice. Similarly, with any other kind of productivity, including mental activity, someone who is very good at and this goes back to before electronic calculators, but it's like in the old days when people did this by hand, people who were good and very adept at doing mathematical calculations in applications where that was required, which would have been things like rocket science and high finance and stuff like that. They were called calculators. You needed to pay them more the better they were at it. So it's like whatever you're paying people to do, whatever labor you want out of them, the better they are at it, you need to pay them more for that. Now that's couched in terms of an employer-employee relationship. But beyond that, it's like, someone could be really, really brilliant, forget about me because I'm not that brilliant, but like say Albert Einstein, incredibly brilliant person. Basically, he was at the top of his profession as a physicist. They gave him the biggest office at the Institute for Advanced Studies in Princeton when he emigrated from Europe because he wasn't welcome there. What happened was that, it's like his income was not very spectacular compared to a captain of industry. Why should, S.C. Johnson, who runs Johnson Wax, why should that person make more than Albert Einstein? And I mean, the real difference is not intellectual capacity or even the value of your intellectual product. It's the entrepreneurial aspect. I mean, Einstein can be viewed as a very entrepreneurial physical theorist, but he wasn't entrepreneurial otherwise in terms of bringing new products to market, which people like, S.G. Johnson, various other business executives, they really, really excelled at this. Tesla, Einstein, Steinmetz developing these electronic products, various people, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, people like that who transform industry by creating very, very disruptive new innovations. These are things that, it's like you're taking a tremendous risk. So you have to be compensated for that if your risk pays off. It's your money that's in the game, because if your innovation does not find favor with the consumer, you're the one who's in charge of this failed enterprise, and you pay the price accordingly. It's a very effective self-disciplining program, It's something that has an added benefit in that it rewards the people who succeed and make everybody's lives better, but it also penalizes people that employ financial capital in wasteful manners.
And that's great. What I also hear sometimes that people think like a capitalist system is unjust because it rewards folks that they don't think are essential. For example, a teacher will get a certain salary while Leonardo DiCaprio is making millions upon millions upon millions upon millions of dollars. What value is Leonardo DiCaprio giving to the people that this teacher isn't giving? Because she certainly may be providing more value. But when I look at it, I think, well, actually, he wouldn't be getting those millions and millions of dollars if he wasn't bringing lots of eyeballs to the screens and people willing to pay for that. So, in fact, he's generating tons and tons and tons of value just by the fact that he's in a movie. Whether you like that fact or not,
well, I think you should do a full disclosure here, because the bias is obvious that you would bring in movies. Right. I noticed you didn't bring in real estate title searchers like me, and why I'm not making a lot of money. You went right to the actors.
I went right to the actors.
But the point, but I just want to piggyback on the question just a little bit. There's two factors to that, though, Robert. Right, and I hope you can hold what Mark said too. What I'm going to say, there's a lot more people that can teach elementary school than there are that can do what Leonardo DiCaprio does. And so you have both a demand and a supply situation that's leading to these income discrepancies, correct?
I think, it's like people who produce value, you have to understand someone like Leonardo DiCaprio. I mean, not only is he, pleasing lots of people who go to see his movies, and, it's like, no one's holding the gun to their head, making them go to see the latest Leonardo DiCaprio movie. And it's like history, sad to say, is replete with, Hollywood products with huge stars that were goddamn dogs, and people stayed away in droves.
Yeah.
I remember there's this, I think it was, some movie about F. Scott Fitzgerald with Gregory Peck and Ava Gardner. I forget the name. It's a big budget thing in the 50s. And
Mark was in that.
I just can't remember the name of the movie, but I remember the studio executives going to the premiere, and there was like no one there, and they just turned to each other and they said, "How did they know?" Because it's just like, and I mean, you watch it on TV. It's not a real exciting film, but it's not god awful. It just didn't deliver what people were looking for at that time. So I mean, then there's also the issue that if Leonardo DiCaprio, a big star like that, stars in a movie, even if the movie's a disaster, he's instrumental in getting it made. His involvement, and that provides lots and lots of employment and benefit for everybody who works. And I mean, Hollywood pictures, even today, are ludicrously inefficient enterprises that have all this like, I don't even know if it's union feather bedding. It might be, but if you produce a film in Hollywood with union labor, it's almost grotesquely expensive.
There's a quote from von Mises in the Ultimate Foundation of Economic Science. And I'm not going to get the quote exact, but he basically says nothing demonstrates the inferiority of the masses more than the fact that they rail against effects that their own behavior brings about. And what that reminds me of, I once, when I was incarcerated, had a debate with a correctional officer. He was so pissed off about the price of Patriot tickets and the price of things that you could, had to buy at the stadium. And he kept saying to me, it shouldn't cost that much. And I told him, if you didn't want to go so badly, not just him personally, but the fact the fact that everybody wants to go is what drives
they all
the
want
price.
to eat a hot dog and drink a beer.
Yeah, but they don't like the fact that on the other side, you're then driving up the prices of these things.
Well, I'm no fan of overpriced.
Oh, no.
Well, it makes sense.
Ian Gilmore says that having an external guest is restraining the worst habits of the hosts here. It also seems to be restraining the super chats. Just to throw that out there, we should. I have to swear, Robert. Please forgive me, but we're waiting on some super fucking chats and super fucking stickers. So just to let everybody know,
you want me to talk about Diego's comment?
What did Diego say?
He said that teachers destroy minds, and especially school administrators.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Especially in the West, they should be getting, they should be paying back their income. They shouldn't. They're not. His perspective is they're not underpaid. They're overpaid.
Well, I would take away the union so that teachers have to be paid on merit. And they have to actually produce results, and then there would be no limit to what a teacher could make. There could also be no bottom. Thank you. Is this a super fucking chat?
It is, because I've guilted her. I've guilted the audience.
Jenna, she says, okay. Thank you so much for that. So there was a section here that I wanted to talk about because I think people lose sight of this fact. That you said in your article. Until the Industrial Revolution, most of humanity was trapped in the crushing poverty of subsistence agriculture. And technological process finally allowed increasing percentages of the population to enjoy higher standards of living. Now, most of the rewards of economic growth were initially captured by the wealthiest property owners, entrepreneurs, and capitalists who founded and engaged in the new industries, that income and wealth would become more concentrated and income equality would rise. Now, this is in the beginnings of the Industrial Revolution, which gives the sort of the lie, which gives this sort of the merit to the Gilded Age concept, where they thought there was this incredible wealth inequality. I've always said rising out of poverty is a really ugly process anyway, and that of course the people who are first inventing and innovating are probably going to get the greater amount of wealth, but as production increases, as the individual becomes more productive, their standard of living rises.
Real quickly, we have a super fucking sticker from Teresa Fritz.
Thank you,
and a super fucking chat from Diego, who said I've guilted him through altruism into donating stuff. I want to also piggyback on what you just said, Mark. Mark has gotten in some trouble for defending things like child labor and things of that nature. And what he meant by it was simply that if you've got a country in abject poverty, you can't just go from abject poverty to opulence. There's stages that you have to go through as you industrialize. And that the reason that these kids end up in shops is they're better off there than where they were previously. Am I catching your position accurately, Mark? I just want to make sure.
Yes. It's an unfortunate aspect of rising from abject poverty. When your choice is you have to work in a sweatshop or sift through garbage dumps or sell yourself on the streets or go into the black market selling drugs or risking yourself, or as in India, maiming yourself in order to beg on the street to get more money. I mean, clearly, given the context and choices available to those folks, the best choice is what's offered to them. And of course, that choice also provides for them the capacity to rise up and even go and even make themselves. What do you think about that idea? Because people rail against sweatshops all the time, and of course, there's reason to rail against them in some respects, but also that prevents people in third world countries from rising up economically, since they don't have the capacity, they don't have the capital to make things as nice as we have them here.
Ben Powell at Texas Tech has studied sweatshops extensively. In fact, he's gone on field trips to sweatshops in Malaysia and Vietnam and the Philippines and Mexico. And primarily, first off, by American standards, they often are quite nice places to work.
Wow.
Which is he wasn't really prepared for that. I think the worst place he found, one thing that was really remarkable is that in addition to employing underage kids that would not be legally employable outside agriculture in the United States. They also provided childcare and other amenities, which are typically an issue and a problem for American workers. So in some ways, they were ahead of us.
Wow.
And this was provided, basically just as an inducement to the workers. The benefit to the employer, I think, was to provide a stable workforce so that people wouldn't, they wouldn't lose some of their best workers as they enter childbearing age. So, I mean, it is absolutely essential that as a society gets wealthier, what happens is it typically does that in an uneven way, and it becomes, more and more unequal. What happens is, and this is Simon Kuznets, the Kuznets Curve. Early stage industrialization imposes greater income inequality and greater, environmental degradation. Once a society becomes wealthy enough, income, becomes more equally diffused throughout the society, so inequality goes down again, and then the society has the resources to worry about environmental degradation, so it can, regulate and address those. And our environmental quality in the United States is much better today, post Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, than it was in, the 60s.
And which is why
of course,
Europe is reforesting, America is reforesting,
yes,
our natural resources are.
And the place that's creating all the greenhouse gases is China, which is still climbing up the Kuznets curve.
Now,
Right.
Piketty specifically rejects the Kuznets curve, right?
Yes, because he has bad data, so he can't find evidence of it, and he thinks, well, this refutes it. Well, no, it doesn't. If you adjust the data, you find that it's very much in line with the Kuznets curve.
Now, I want to just show off a little bit. Kuznets is also where we get the idea of price level from, correct?
I'm not sure.
Oh my God, I know more than the Economist.
Well, you want to expand on that a little, Mike, for our audience?
What do you mean expand? The price level. When you hear people refer to the price level,
Yeah,
let me specifically find out what the hell I'm talking about, because I might just be all wet on this.
Can I give some technical explanation?
Yes,
Whoever
please.
came up with it, it's like when we talk about prices, we primarily are talking about the consumer price index, and this has to have predated Kuznets, but it's like a bunch of economists who work for the Labor Department. They collected all this data on wages nationwide, and basically they said, in order to interpret it, we have to know what people's purchasing power is, and it varies throughout different parts of the country. But initially, they just went home and they asked their wives, "What do you buy, right, in a typical month?" And it would include obsolete products like lard and collar stays and stuff like that don't exist anymore. But basically, they settle on a typical basket of consumer goods, and then they went out on a junket nationwide to figure out how much this cost in different cities. And it's like, it was kind of like an employment security scheme for federal bureaucrats, but that was the origin of the consumer price index. And it dates back to just before World War I, and it's been collected, consistently ever since. Now, one problem with it is that once you set the basket of goods, it doesn't allow for any substitution. It's like, if the price of apples doubles, what happens in the real world is you're going to substitute something else for these more expensive apples in order to maximize the value of your consumption basket and get the most benefit from it. But in the principle, at least in the short run, the consumer price index assumes that you can't do that. So we say it overstates inflation by about 2%. All right. Now, to overcome that, periodically, about every 10 years, they do a new survey of what should be included in that, and they readjust what's included in the basket of goods. So you get some long-term adjustment. But, it's like substitution, and short-term price changes are completely wiped out of this. It's just not taken account of. The other thing that they attempt to do, and it's at best an approximation, is hedonic adjustment to capture quality improvements in products. And it's like when they started doing this, well, products didn't improve that fast. But today, it's like, when I moved into this house, the former owners left behind a very large, although it's small by today's standards, but it's a plasma screen TV. It was worn out and burned out, but when they bought it around 1995, it must have cost $15,000.
Wow.
And it had gigantic pixels. I mean, it's like each pixel on this screen was like this big. It was like annoying to look at, and it was so old it had CNN burned into the corner. So I mean, so I went to Walmart and I bought a much larger flat screen TV that weighs less, and it cost me like $400. And I could probably get the same thing for around $200 today. It's like, so I mean, they have to capture the fact that better, higher quality goods are available at a lower price because of technological improvement. And that's just an approximation. It's like, that's not real data that it's based on, but they just know if we don't make this adjustment, we're going to further divorce the consumer price index from reality. And we use that for so much, like indexing many, employment contracts, especially union contracts, and Social Security benefits.
It seems self-evident to me that capitalism has increased accessibility to technology, that it and increased the standard of living for everybody, that it boggles my mind that a socialist in the 21st century does not see that. That a computer in the 1950s might have taken up 2 floors of space and cost several $1 million, and only a massive corporation could afford it. But now you have something in the palm of your hand for about $600 that gives you access to all the information in the world.
Well, let me suggest some explanation for this, like persistent dissatisfaction with the way things are. And I mean, dissatisfaction with the way things are is a good, very objective, abstract way of motivating entrepreneurial innovation, but it also motivates a lot of envy. And I mean, go back to the Middle Ages, where you have like nobles who are especially privileged. In cities and towns, you also have these privileged classes of craftsmen and merchants who are, they're not noble, but they're like the next best thing. And in many cases, they're richer than nobles because they're living off of trade and productive activity. They're like members of the textile guild. Then what happens is the Industrial Revolution comes in, and these nouvelle riche people come in with these technological changes and upset the natural order of society. And now it's like unless they can adapt to it and become entrepreneurs themselves and make a living off of this rising technological tide, people who are privileged under the old regime are disprivileged under the emerging new paradigm. So they're naturally going to be very, very, it's not only is it dangerous from their perspective, but it's just unjust. It's unfair. Because it goes against their established expectations of the way things are supposed to be. And so it's like envy of people who are being successful is it's like, unfortunately, it's not an admirable aspect of human character, but I think it's a natural part of human character. It's like we have these expectations of how things should be, and then other people bust that by introducing a new product and becoming very, very wealthy off of it. And that seems unfair to some people in some sense.
It just occurred to me that our guest is dressed very sharply, like he's from a ZZ Top video, and you and I, Mark, are dressed like bums. I'm just putting it out there. But Simon
What is it?
Kuznets, Simon
Michael, what does the
Kuznets,
shirt say?
San Diego,
Oh, cool.
from visiting with the great Jim
Yeah,
Valiant.
he didn't wear a shirt in San Diego, but he's wearing
There's
the
the.
San Diego shirt here.
Don't bring that up. So
Remember Ron Borgensi's tagline?
who?
Stay classy, San Diego.
I never heard that. Now I learned something
Oh,
new.
you
And
gotta,
I did.
you gotta see Anchorman.
Kuznets wasn't the price level guy. That was my mistake. He's the GDP, GMP guy. He
Okay,
came up with the ideas on how to calculate those. So I forgot to tell the audience. Well, Mark really forgot because he did the introduction. If I did it, I would have mentioned it. But I have to be out of here by 10 of. So I've only got 5 minutes. So
Michael, you said that 5 times, by the way. So I didn't have to mention.
I never said that during the show. That was all pre-show.
Okay.
All pre-show.
Okay.
See what I mean? This is what I'm dealing with. Okay. But Mark is wonderful. I kid. He's got the great hat and mustache. So what the hell was I going to say now? I forgot. Oh, what do you see troubling right now in the with the economic policies on the federal level?
I think that the cornerstone of bad economic policy under the Trump administration is tariffing our trading partners. What makes that worse is it's not an across the board tariff. It's basically, and I hope I'm not being unfair about this, but my perception is that it's like it's graduated by, it's like it's less if you suck up to the president, and it's higher or it stays high if you don't suck up to him. And it's like, a large part of our economy is built on international trade, and it's like just destroying that is not a wise idea. And even if you don't raise tariffs permanently to exorbitant levels like we did in the early 30s, raising them, threatening to raise them, raising them, lowering, and doing it very selectively to provide leverage, diplomatic leverage, and saying that you're playing 3D chess. It's like it creates such uncertainty for people who are engaged in international trade. It's disrupting supply chains. It's making the cost of production in the United States go up dramatically, and it just makes the uncertainty that you have to face as a producer or as an entrepreneurial innovator, which is it's bad enough of a barrier to begin with. It just makes it that much worse. So it's something that we shouldn't be doing. The immigration policy, I think, is disastrous. It's unkind, incompassionate. Its supporters revel in those features of it, but it's like, our economy relies on guest workers, and we're basically chasing them out of the country. And it's like, where do you think our food comes from? And then what else is wrong? Because there's so much. This is the other thing: monetary policy. I'm not a big fan of the Fed. The Fed should have raised interest rates and kept them higher for much, much longer. But basically, to make up for things that the administration has screwed up in other venues, they're basically saying you need to inject more liquidity into the economy and lower interest rates. And it looks like they're going to, first off, the Fed on its own is doing that in response, which I think is a big mistake. And then it looks like we're going to get a new Fed chairman who is going to lower interest rates as low as the president wants them, and we'll keep them that way. And it's like, it's a great way to prime us for
a toady
crushing.
We're gonna get a toady that's gonna get in there for
I mean, if he were just a toady and he just spoke that way, that would be bad enough. But if he's actually making policy for the United monetary policy, it's like it's not going to end well.
No, it won't. And should that happen, do you have any? I mean, we can't make exact predictions, of course, with stuff like this. But Trump has been fond of saying, going down to zero and even negative interest rates. What effect will that have on the economy? I mean,
Well, it will look good when you look at least initially, when you look at GDP, because with low interest rates, what happens is that it's very cheap for firms to borrow. So what firms will do is they'll look at, we can build a factory in Altoona and that'll give us a 15% return. So if we can borrow money at less than 15%, we'll build that factory. We can build another factory in Reading, Pennsylvania, but that'll only give us a 2% return. But now that we can borrow money at 1%, or the Fed will pay us 3%, if a negative interest rate, we'll get paid to borrow this money. We'll build that factory, but it's going to give us a 2% return. So what's going to happen is there'll be more investment spending, which makes GDP go up, all right? But it will not be productive investment spending. It's like the market interest rate should be permitted to perform the useful function of telling us which projects should not be engaged in and what level of productivity you should expect for anything that you do. And what they'll do instead is they'll do less productive things. On the consumer side, people are going to look at, well, should I save this last few dollars that I earn, or should I spend it? The return is practically zero, so I'm going to spend it. So consumer spending is going to go up. GDP is going to get higher. Everything's going to look great. It's like we may even get JD Vance reelected on or elected on the strength of this. But it's like a reckoning will come, because you can't expand the economy that way. It's not sustainable. It's like you have to have productive investment, and it has to be backed by saving. You can't have additional investment and less saving and hope that that's somehow going to be sustained.
Yeah, assuming the bubble doesn't burst before
it's going to make GDP go up, and you're going to say, well, the economy is just skyrocketing. Look at what a brilliant, administrator I am. I made the economy boom. Yeah, it's an unsustainable boom, and you're also going to make it bust. But President Trump is going to blame that on somebody else.
Of course.
Robert, we would love to have you back on to get into a deeper discussion of the trade cycle. So I really hope you will be willing to come back.
Yeah, I'd be delighted.
Put up with me. I mean, Mark's really great. I'm the jerk of the pair. Everybody knows that. But I'm also the more fun. I'm also the funner one.
Well, not true. And funner is not
about fun.
So where can people find you, Robert?
I have an online presence in Facebook and LinkedIn, and I've also published a bunch of books which are available through Books By, and you'll find links to them on my websites.
Awesome. Thank you again so much. Mark, give a quick capitalist thought of the day.
Well, I give the capitalist.
I'll give the capitalist thought of the day real quickly.
Okay, good.
Folks, in life, not everybody's equal. We all come into this world with different skills, different talents. We also put in different amounts of effort in developing those skills and those talents. We have different choices and different values about what we want to do with our time, with our energy, with our intelligence. Given all these natural differences, inequality when it comes to wealth and income is inevitable. It isn't a bad thing. It's the natural course of events when government isn't using force. With that, we'll turn it over to Mark. No matter of fact, I'm going to do it because I want to be quick here. I have a question for the audience. Please go to YouTube and answer this question. What other types of guests would you like us to have on the show? I mean, economists, psychologists, philosophers. Please let us know on YouTube. Take it away, Mark.
Robert, it's been great having you on the show. You've been very informative. You're a breath of fresh air. I love listening to you, and hopefully you'll come back again. Folks, join us here tomorrow, same bat time, same bat place, 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern. You have 23 hours to check your premises. If you've got an ounce of statism and you get it out now, and embrace liberty, embrace freedom. It is the greatest thing since the domestication of fire. So, folks, we'll see you tomorrow. Peace.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
Thank you.